Marine reacts to Warhammer 40k, Astra Militarum Imperial Guard by the Templin Institute. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. So, the Imperial Guard, from what I've heard and seen, that these are supposed to be more the ground troops who aren't genetically enhanced, more similar to like regular day humans. They have armor, they have weapons, but they're not the best kind that you can get. Kind of always reminds me of the Marine Corps. And as far as this video goes, I'm not really sure what's going to really delve into. I am hoping to kind of learn a little bit, maybe the history. I believe they call the Space Marines chapters. I'm not sure what they would call it in the Imperial Guard, or like their, I guess you would call it battalions, units, etc. Also seeing if there's any prominent figures that have done some things that I guess in today's world would have warranted a Medal of Honor. I'd be curious to know if there's actually a video out there, or if in this video that they actually show some kind of like the same thing with the Space Marine video that I did, where they actually show like the recruitment process. Also, I'd be curious to kind of see what kind of like a daily life would be for an Imperial Guard, and also if it seems to be a lifelong contract. Is it by a contract basis, like every 4 years? I've heard that these guys are the type of badasses that are going into these battles against these crazy ass monsters, and obviously they're not as well equipped as a Space Marine, but they're still getting after it. So there's quite a bit of level of respect. But real quick, before we get into the actual video, don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification button right there. That way you get notified every time I do upload, sometimes uploading twice a day. Typically working on them in the mornings, and then releasing them in the late afternoon to late evening. That way when you all get off work, you can enjoy these videos at your leisure. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and see what the Imperial Guard in the Warhammer 40k universe is all about.
In the grim darkness of the far future, the age of the Imperium is over. Across the universe, a death knell has sounded, for the time of ending has begun. Tyrannid hive fleets move inexorably towards the guiding light of the Astronomicon. Orcs in the trillions gather around the banners of the warlord Ghazghkull Thraka. Necron tombs, silent for millennia, now awaken, and a warp storm of unprecedented fury has torn the galaxy in two. The final prelude, it is whispered, to the ultimate victory of the ruinous powers. The fate of humanity rests with the myriad of forces at the Imperium's command. A single shot fired by the Officio Assassinorum can end a rebellion before it begins. The Collegia Titanica can grind entire worlds to powder. The Adepta Sororitas can...
Wait a minute. Did she just say worlds? Well, I mean, actually, I can kind of see why. It's pretty big.
The Adepta Sororitas can cast the holy word of the Emperor to even the darkest corners of the galaxy. But of all the armies to have ever raised their weapons and banners in the defense of mankind, there is one above all through which the destiny of the Imperium will be decided. Each day on 1,000,000 worlds, women and men, ordinary citizens of the Imperium, depart their homes, often never to return. They are sent to the front lines of wars beyond number and against eldritch creatures, immortal warriors, and the powers of hell itself, expected to hold the line. They are slaughtered in the ruins of once proud cities, in the depths of forgotten battlefields, and to the laughter of thirsting gods. But for 10,000 years, that line has held. For 10,000 years, one force in the galaxy has stood against the enemies of the Imperium and spoken to them in the language of fire.
I mean, obviously we know that it's going to be the Imperial Guard, but for 10,000 years, it really, again, is putting into that perspective that there's so many people in this universe. And even just saying that there's so many is really understating it. Because, I mean, like they said, they're going against eldritch creatures. And as far as I know, they're not under any augmentations. I don't know if that one comment about when someone said that if you survive for about a week, you're considered a veteran. I don't know how true that comment was. But seeing all the things that they're kind of holding the line against, you can kind of see why that would come into play. Because it doesn't seem like, obviously, life. Not only is it not going to be very good for the most part, because obviously you're engaging in battles, but that it's going to be a very quick one, more likely than not. Unless, obviously, I'm pretty sure there's prominent figures that have done some incredible things. So
each day on a million worlds, women and men, ordinary citizens of the Imperium, depart their homes so they might fight for humanity as soldiers in the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. The scale and complexity of the Imperial Guard rivals that of the Imperium itself. It is the largest coordinated fighting force in the galaxy, serving as the first and often only line of defense against the innumerable powers that threaten the continued existence of mankind. While it is famous for the vast numbers of tanks, aircraft, and artillery under its command, at its core, it is comprised of countless billions of mortal soldiers, organized into hundreds of thousands of regiments. The recruitment of these regiments is among the most pivotal duties assigned to every Imperial commander, planetary lord, or Imperial governor. According to the law of the Imperium, every world under its authority must maintain a standing army to preserve the planetary government and deter any form of internal insurrection or foreign invasion.
obviously, most likely, what's the word for it? I believe it's called conscription, where you're required to serve a certain amount of years in the military, and it happens around. I can't really think of countries off the top of my head. I think South Korea is one. But it seems like, especially with with everything that's out there, that's obviously something that would probably be popular within these worlds. And then considering the fact that they have billions and billions of people in the Imperial Guard.
Each of these planetary defense forces exist as their own individual bodies, free to defend their own world and enforce their own standards as they see fit, provided they contribute a fraction of their number to serve the wider Imperium and join the Imperial Guard. The method by which these troops are recruited varies significantly from sector to sector and planet to planet. Defense forces of many worlds are little more than rival gangs, nomadic tribesmen, or condemned criminals, and selection for service within the Imperial Guard is often done under threat of summary execution. Other planets might have well-established professional standing armies who view recruitment into the Imperial Guard as a noble, heroic pursuit.
It was good to see that they still have drill 40,000 years in the future.
However the individuals and units selected to join the Imperial Guard are chosen, their quality reflects on that world's ruler. Should a regiment provided to the Imperial Guard be of insufficient quality, the life of even a planetary governor is immediately forfeit. For this reason...
Alright, so I granted there's going to be a lot of people, and when you have a lot of people and you're just trying to get bodies, there's obviously going to be diminishing, I guess if you want to call it, the quality of Imperial Guards that are coming through, just because, sure, you're going to have, like, I guess you want to call them like your key players that are going to be really good at what they do. And you're going to have the ones that just, I guess, kind of slide by. You need the numbers, so you push them through. But then the governor of a planet his life would be forfeit if the quality, or I guess this is just referring to that fraction that is actually working with or for the Imperium. And in that case scenario, it would probably be most likely that they would send their best troops. But then again, they wouldn't want to send them all, because obviously if you've got troops but they're not very good at what they do, you can see how an invasion would be pretty simple or easy from other races.
The soldiers selected for the Astra Militarum tend to be drawn from the elite troops of any planetary defense force. Even so, the composition and number of regiments drawn from each planet is wildly diverse. A highly industrialized hive world with 1 trillion Imperial citizens might be required to provide hundreds of millions of soldiers, tens of millions of tanks, and other mechanized equipment. These would be supplemented by professional uniforms, munitions, replacement parts, and every manner of material required to outfit and sustain a force of that size. An agricultural or feudal world, by contrast, might have a significantly lower military tribute, providing as little as 1 million men and 100,000 cavalry.
Can you imagine that? 1 million being considered a little? I keep getting reminded how big this universe is, and just the amount of not only people, but just all the races in general.
Such soldiers may lack even the most rudimentary equipment and possess little experience handling anything more complex than a windmill. This enormous disparity within the Imperial Guard makes any attempt at standardization impossible. Every regiment is equipped in the manner of their homeworld, and many such worlds have grown famous for the conduct of their soldiers. Prized by even the Adeptus Terra as the epitome of the Astra Militarum are the Cadian shock troops. The regiments of Cadia are equipped with the highest standards of gear available, and the martial culture of their homeworld has imbued every soldier with a natural affinity for life in military service. Cadia itself is but a memory, destroyed during the 13th Black Crusade of Abaddon the Despoiler, but that memory has served the Imperium as much in death as in life. Factory worlds across the galaxy produce equipment for the Imperial Guard to Cadian specifications, and countless regiments are trained and deployed in the fashion of their Cadian brethren. Equally legendary, if less ubiquitous regiments are raised on worlds spanning the breadth of the Imperium. The Ice Warriors of Valhalla are said to be as inexorable as the winter itself, ruthless as the bitter frost, and as certain as death. They have acquired an infamous reputation for their thundering artillery barrages, combined with waves of charging infantry. Valhallans are the masters of Arctic warfare, viewed by outsiders as somehow impervious to harsh conditions or the value of human life. Fueled by the forges of their hive world and millennia of warfare are the regiments of the Armageddon Steel Legion. Highly mechanized and mobile, the Steel Legion has an unequaled number of tanks and armored personnel carriers in their service, and time again have charged across the wastelands of Armageddon, supported in the skies above by gunships and fighter aircraft. The Mordian Iron Guard are widely derided for their stiff and unforgiving demeanor, ridiculed as more troubled with maintaining their brightly colored uniforms and marching in perfect formation than the more pragmatic concerns of soldiery. Such discipline is an absolute necessity on their strictly rationed homeworld, however, and in battle, their iron resolve makes them cold-blooded killers. They will hold their ground at any cost, laying waste to the enemy with perfectly disciplined fire. Desert Raiders of Talarn, by contrast, are unequaled within the Guard for their guerrilla tactics. Evasive and opportunistic, they have perfected the doctrine of hit-and-run warfare, harassing their opponents without mercy before disappearing into the dust kicked up by their rugged mounts. Every regiment in the Astra Militarum, regardless of their homeworld, possess some level of fatalism, but none can match the notoriously grim warriors of the Death Corps of Krieg.
I've been hearing a lot of things in the comments about it. You gotta check these guys out.
Once a prosperous hive world, Krieg today is an atomic wasteland, the result of a rebellion against the Imperium for which its soldiers must now atone. They are synonymous with their heavy greatcoats and sinister gas masks, rarely removing them even to eat or drink. They specialize in wars of attrition, where their willingness to die for the Emperor exceeds any other consideration. But in the minds of many,
so they're more throw everything you got at the enemy type deal.
Across the Imperium, Catachan alone is a worthy successor to Cadia. It is a death world of unrelenting butchery, where every plant, animal, and insect are hostile to human life. Catachans have a well-deserved reputation as the deadliest jungle warfare experts in the galaxy, as even the bloodiest battle might be a favorable reprieve compared to life on their homeworld. Close combat is their particular specialty, along with extensive use of traps, mines, and improvised weaponry. With no other resources, knowledge, or worth, regiments of jungle fighters are the sole export of Catachan and used to devastating effect. There are countless other regiments of renown within the Astra Militarum: the Vestroyan Firstborn, the Attilan Rough Riders, the Elysian Drop Troops, or the Tanith First and Only. But for every world or regiment honored for the heroism and dedication of its soldiers, 1,000 more remain unsung and forgotten, save by the Emperor himself. Regardless of their origin, every regiment is subordinate to the Lord Commander Militant. In theory, this individual passes on the dictates of the High Lords of Terra to the Lord Commander of each segmentum, who in turn hold authority and responsibility for vast swaths of the galaxy. In practice, the Lord Commander Militant is primarily a political position, more concerned with overseeing the bureaucracy of the Departamento Munitorum, and devoted to the general administration, personnel assignment, supply, and military logistics of the Imperial Guard, rather than any direct orders to its armies. In the rare instances in which centralized command has been imposed over far-flung Imperial regiments, the results are often disastrous. The unpredictable realities of faster-than-light travel mean that communiques and orders arrive years or decades after they were meant to, or in a single garbled transmission impossible to understand. Entire wars have been lost when dogmatic commanders have stubbornly implemented nonsensical orders to their subordinates. The practicalities of the galaxy and of command instead dictate that authority over the Imperial Guard falls to the officer of the highest rank in any given theater of war. While such a command structure is plagued by overlapping regions of authority, competing commanders issuing conflicting orders, and needless complexity, it is the only method by which the Astra Militarum can remain flexible enough to remain operationally effective. Individual commanders vary tremendously in their approach. Some command from miles behind the front lines, or from the relative safety of low orbit. Others are present where fighting is thickest, leading their soldiers through example.
This is another thing I can kind of relate to my experience in the Marines. So obviously, when you have any form of leadership, and there's going to be someone who either leads from the front or they're going to lead from the back, right? So leading from the front and leading by example, I understand it. It's great to kind of have the mentality, but in my opinion, I don't think it's great for the long term, because if you're, for example, we had a lieutenant who consistently was trying to go through doors first when we were doing a mountain town environment or urban fighting, and it was during training, but obviously we tried to make it as real as possible. And this lieutenant kept on trying to go through the door first. Now, if he gets shot, obviously he's going to be a big target. Him and the platoon sergeant. They're considered big targets, and if they go down, then you've really lost not only leadership, and now it has to switch, but now you also have a body that you have to get out of there. So I guess you could say it's admirable that people would want to lead from the front, but it's not most likely the preferred, at least in my opinion, especially with the Imperial Guard. They have so many people, and for the most part, they're probably relying on this one leader just to let them know what they have to do. And as soon as you take away that leadership, everyone could freeze up, and now everyone starts panicking. Now, as far as leading from the back, technically not even the back, because we would always have like our lieutenant more in the center of, like, say, a patrol. And that way, we kind of always got security around him, and he's less likely to get shot. I mean, obviously, it's always a possibility. But then again, it's kind of, think of it as we're playing chess, and he's the hand that is kind of moving us. Except, obviously, he's not going to be holding our hands and telling us what to do all the time. It all relates to back, that was a big saying, individual action. You know, you got to be able to not only, I guess, take orders, but you also got to be able to, like, know how to adapt and just, have common sense. Example, you get told to cross the street, but you see two guys aiming down, and obviously maybe the person who told you doesn't see them. You're not just going to go just because you're told. You're using common sense to be like, can't, there's two guys, I see them, they're facing down towards us. So yeah, a lot of that just came to my mind right now as far as like forms of leadership and leading from the front, leading from the back. I think of it as more being beneficial if they lead from the center. In my opinion, obviously.
In other cases, Astra Militarum forces are subordinate to other branches of the Imperial military. It is not uncommon for Imperial Guard regiments to supplement the Space Marines of the Adeptus Astartes, the Skitarii of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or any other force as required. In rare cases, such as during an Imperial Crusade or an extraordinary threat to the entire Imperium, a commander within the Astra Militarum might be granted the title of War Master, This individual is second only to the Lord Commander Militant, and the supreme authority over every Imperial military force within their area of operations. There is rarely more than one War Master within the Imperium at any one time, and many who are granted it prefer to instead be known as a High Solar, rather than be associated with the very first Imperial War Master, the traitor Horus.
The Horus Heresy.
The organizational structures of the Astra Militarum are defined by the ancient text known as the Tactica Imperium. Its knowledge stretches back into antiquity, and many of its teachings predate the rule of the Emperor, the Dark Age of technology, and the unification of ancient Terra. At its most basic tenets, the Tactica Imperium groups squads together based on their specialization. Infantry platoons comprise infantry companies, which in turn make up infantry regiments.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty similar. I mean, starting from the bottom as far as fire team, and you're going to go into squad, platoon, company, regiment. I'm really hoping I didn't mess that up, and someone's going to call me out in the comments saying, like, I can't believe you don't know how your structure goes. I've been out for a while.
Tank, cavalry, artillery, and support regiments are structured in this same manner. Regiments together, therefore, complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, ensuring that the army as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like every other facet of the Imperial Guard, the composition of its regiments again varies wildly. When facing the massed numbers of a Tyranid swarm or the hit-and-fade tactics of the Drukhari, the standardized methods of organization lose their effectiveness, and entire armies must be restructured to best combat these threats. More varied and versatile deployments are often favored by local commanders. Amongst the more exotic forces utilized by the Astra Militarum are the warp-sensitive psychers of Scholastica Psychana. Their value to the Imperial Guard outweighs the moral repugnance they evoke, unleashing warp-fueled devastation equal to an entire company of heavy guns. Less unusual, but still uncommon within the Imperial Guard, are the varieties of abhumans within the Militarum Auxilia. Millennia of mutations and extreme environmental conditions have shaped sub-races of hulking Ogrins and keen-eyed Ratlings, who have found great success as shock troopers and scouts respectively.
So those ones aren't really genetically or physically augmented in any way, but they possess these things because of mutations. Oh, and also those are the shock troops that I've been hearing a lot about. Also, real quick, I've seen that everyone, or the majority, except for some of the Imperial Guards, obviously, like, not mentioning the ones that are shooting a rifle, but I feel like the majority of every single race has a gun always in the right hand and then a sword in the left hand, or some kind of melee weapon. I just thought that was interesting. Like, everybody likes it, or the majority likes to dual wield.
A common saying is that the only true standardized piece of Imperial equipment issued to every regiment is a commissar. Such a thing would never be said within their presence, however, for it is the task of these political officers to maintain the morale and loyalty of their troops, doing so typically at gunpoint. A commissar has the authority to overrule even the commanding officer of a regiment, and can inspire their charges to accomplish what might have seemed impossible. Even the unassuming lasgun, the most widely used weapon of the Imperial Guard, exists in 1,000 models and variations. It can be constructed out of wood and plastic, metal and composites, emblazoned with golden sigils, or garish, improvised improvements. It can function as a sniper rifle or pistol, a lightweight weapon easier to handle and aim, or illegally modified to deliver more energy per shot.
Illegally modified? In any case, that gun just really sounded like an AK-47 as far as its durability.
It can be built in advanced assembly lines, or by hastily trained peasants. It functions even when covered in dust, mud, or drenched in water. Neither blazing heat or frigid cold impedes its effectiveness. It is simple and reliable, a perfect metaphor for the Imperial Guard. The modern Astra Militarum began as the Imperial Army. The force was first used by the Emperor of Man during the Wars of Unification on Earth, and later to support the advances of the Space Marine legions during the Great Crusade. During this time, the Imperial Army commanded land, air, and space assets, with no differentiation between the space-based and ground-based branches of the service. The betrayal by War Master Horus and the subsequent civil war he unleashed forever tarnished the reputation of the Imperial Army. Unnumbered regiments joined the traitor legions, spreading death and corruption across the Imperium. When it was reformed as the Astra Militarum, all naval assets were stripped from its command and organized into the complementary Imperial Navy. With neither force able to mount a campaign without the support of the other, the threat of another large-scale rebellion was, in theory, removed. In all the ages since, the Imperial Guard has remained the backbone of the Imperium's defense. Its forces have fought across every battlefield against every foe, enduring the stain of defeat and seizing the exultation of victory. Its greatest commanders have entered the highest pantheon of Imperial heroes, with names like Caiaphas Cain, Sly Marbo, Ibram Gaunt, Lord Solar Macarius, Sebastian Yarrick, and Usarkar Creed known across the entire galaxy.
Okay, so we got some prominent figures, and these are... I'm probably going to have to go to them individually, just to kind of see what they were about, what they did, what got them that prominence.
It is the name Olanius Pius, however, that is revered above all others. The extent of his deeds, and whether such a man ever existed at all, has been lost to antiquity. But, according to legend, at the height of the Horus heresy, as the Imperial Palace and all Terra burned beneath the might of the ruinous powers, a single man placed himself between the Emperor of Mankind and the arch-traitor Horus Lupercal, War Master and Chosen of the Four Gods of Chaos. Some accounts claim it was a Terminator of the Adeptus Astartes, or a warrior of the Legio Custodes, but every guardsman knows with certainty that he was nothing more than an ordinary man.
Holy shit. And did I hear Terminator? That's kind of, I mean, that in and of itself, obviously I don't know too much about him, but can you believe the balls on this guy? I don't know, I just felt like that little part right there really just stuck out of me. I'd be very curious also to know like more about him, his history, his upbringing.
A mortal soldier who faced down the greatest terror all reality had to offer and died standing. Alien tyrants, immortal intelligences, the dark gods, and the universe itself make mockery of human life. For against the terrible foes of mankind, a single guardsman alone can do nothing. But a guardsman is never alone. They are deployed into battle alongside their fire teams, their squads and sections, their platoons, companies, and regiments. Their armies cover entire continents, entire worlds. Behind them roar the engines of battle tanks bearing the names of immortal heroes, formations of war machines of such scale and power that entire mountains might be ground to dust beneath their treads. Overhead, the skies are filled with gunships and attack craft, unleashing such fury that the sun itself is concealed behind the black smoke of rocket propellant. At night, entire horizons are lit with the fires of heavy guns, a declaration to the enemies of the Imperium that they have come here to die. But should every world fall, every fortress be overrun, and the gates of Terra defended by the last guardsmen in the Imperium, they will still not stand alone. The spirit of the Emperor is with all who fight in his name. And while no army is big enough to conquer the galaxy, faith alone can overturn the universe.
Alright, let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. A lot of information was being thrown right in the center, right when they were talking about the different types of regiments. So the ones that really stuck out to me are the one with the Krieg, the Catachan. I'm probably butchering that name right now. Those were the ones that kind of really just... The Krieg one, because people have been hyping it up, which has got me excited to check it out. As far as the Catachan, jungle fighter, the guys in the jungles, it gave me this Vietnam type vibe. And I've always been a big fan of military movies, specifically ones that focus in that era. I don't know if it's the music, like Fortunate Son, hearing that, and then I don't know what it is. It's always really held like a big interest in my mind. And the part about them talking about, I believe it was the las gun, that how versatile it is and how durable it can be. It can be thrown in the mud, put water, different types of temperatures. It's not going to really affect it. It's kind of reminding me of the AK-47. So there's definitely like a lot of parallels as far as like probably most likely where people got the inspiration for some of these things. It's also great to see that I guess drill is still going to be a big thing. And obviously, you know, the purpose of that is to just see, at least from what I understood it with my time in, that you want to be able to know how fast and efficient you can follow the orders. And also, it's an easy way for, say, for example, I don't know, let's say general, right? He wants to be able to see his troops, and he wants to be able to see that they have everything. It's a quick way to analyze, to put it simply. I do wish to kind of talk more about the recruitment process a little more in detail, kind of like what they did with the Space Marines. But obviously, different types of regiments, different types of worlds, and it seemed like every planet kind of governs it in their own way. So the recruitment process and training could vary, also depending on the environment. But I would have liked, or you know what, I'm gonna check some of them out, specifically focus on certain regiments like the Cadia. I'm also curious to see if, I don't believe they said it in this video, if there's been any joint operations with some of the other, I guess they wouldn't really do it with other regiments because they're very specific as far as depending on what their environment was. Like I know there was the ones in the snow, there was the ones that, obviously, I'm not even going to say the name, I'm just going to say jungle. They got the ones from the Krieg, where it's like more even the radioactive field type. But I'd be curious to see if they've ever worked, for example, I mean, I'm pretty sure they have, like with Space Marines. I mean, then again, it would depend on the chapter of the Space Marines to see whether or not they would actually do that. And I guess, I don't know, maybe they see it as an insult, saying like, oh, what, you don't think we can do our own job? But I'd just be very curious to see if there are joint operations in that manner. And also, real quick, I just want to say, the guy who was the War Master, who stood in front of Horus, and even though he died, I would be very intrigued to find out what kind of transpired there as far as like a battle. Like, was it a couple minutes? Did Horus just completely overpower him and take him down very quick? But it doesn't matter whether or not he did or not. To me, I guess the significance is saying like, hey, that's a regular human being, and even though he knows he's more than likely gonna die, still is choosing to go forward. I was also very curious about the statement they said that no race has the army to completely conquer the universe. I think, in my opinion, and comment down below who you think has the best chance, like not necessarily by their deals or morals, just who has the best chance of actually conquering the entire universe. I was thinking maybe the orcs, just because like the way they can reproduce via spores. And with the rebellion, I still haven't heard too much about the rebellion. Like, what do they stand for? I mean, it could be kind of obvious as to why they're rebelling, but I haven't really heard too much or any more about them besides the Astarte, the Space Marine mini film that I saw. That was in 1 to 5 parts. So I'd be very curious if anybody does know a video that is on them, so I can get a little more information and understand kind of like what's going on in that scenario. But that's gonna go ahead and finish this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, it really does help me a lot. Dislike if you didn't like it, it helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, check the description down below. You're gonna see a list of about 5. From top to bottom is gonna be how I view them. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.